Start the recording as well. Stream is up. We're recording. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, I will call this meeting to order. It's the September 9th meeting of the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, September 9th, 2021. I'm the chair, Dylan McDowell, and we'll do a quick roll call. Mickey Varney.
Present.
Alan Alexander.
Here.
Tony Cato.
Present.
Woody Dukes.
Present.
And Dave Friedenmaker let us know he will not be in attendance tonight. Rick Hartwig.
Present.
Keith Norris.
Present.
And Paul Rice.
I'm here.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. It feels like a long time, especially taking a month off. It's good to see you all again, and looking forward to the meeting tonight. So there has been a request to move a couple agenda items. I think many of you saw that the Salem Beaver Strategy Update has been postponed, so we are striking that from the agenda. And there's been a request to move the Salem Parks Foundation update up to the top, and which case I think it makes sense to swap that with the parks permitting and usage and permitting update, since that's internal. Are there any objectives to making, or any objections to making that change? All right, wonderful. Well, we will make that adjustment, and let's now move into the review of the minutes. There was quite a few minutes this time. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look through the minutes of our last meeting, as well as some of the updates of the Parks Usage and Planning or Permitting Subcommittee. Are there any changes or adjustments to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
I second it.
And seconded by Paul. We'll do a voice vote for our minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay. The minutes are approved. Thank you all.
Chair, can I just clarify, or do we just approve both sets of minutes for the purposes of kind of recording the approval?
That's a great question. That was my intent, but perhaps for clarification, yes, that was what I intended. Mickey, do you want to add that as a friendly amendment? Should we?
I wanted to mention that's what I intended, since you introduced it as both sets.
Right. Just clarifying. That's good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Keith. You're always keeping us honest.
Are you familiar with our Salem?
Our Salem?
Our Salem.
No.
Dennis, you're on speaker there. All right. Thank you. All right. Well, we will move into our public comment period. We did not receive any written public comment. I see we have two members of potentially the public, Katie and Dennis Will. Were either of you hoping to provide public comment tonight? Okay. I'm not hearing any. We thank you for participating in the meeting and appreciate you being here. So let's jump right into our board item and presentation. We have three big things tonight. The first, as I mentioned, is we're going to hear from the Salem Parks Foundation. Then we have Gretchen Bennett to talk with us, and then we'll provide an update from the subcommittee. So Carol Snyder, I believe you're going to be giving the update. Oh, you're on mute. Let's make sure you're unmuted so we can get what you're saying.
Okay.
There we go.
Now yeah, this is our annual report of activities and accomplishments for our fiscal year, which ends in September. So we're not quite done, but we're close enough. Salem Parks Foundation continued to fund improvements and advocate for Salem City Parks through yet another year impacted by COVID-19. We held 4 virtual meetings by Zoom and also held 2 in-person meetings in Bush Park. We added 2 members to our board this year, Ron Kellerman and Sunny Summers, bringing our total to 11. This year, we doubled our usual funding for our neighborhood park grant program, awarding over $28,000 to neighborhood associations for 9 projects. We funded $2,000 for a gravel pathway at Brown Road Park, and $1,100 to help with the restoration of the historic sundial area in the Rose Garden in Bush Park. $1,995 for restoration of the pollinator garden in Englewood Park, which was damaged during the ice storm. We also did $1,800 for a picnic table at Lee Park, so now they have 2 picnic tables. And we funded $9,000 to replace a very ancient water fountain at Nelson Park. We also funded 5 benches on concrete pads, one in Fairview Park, one in Nelson Park, one in Northgate Park, one in Orchard Heights Park, and 2 in Deer Park near the bike track. In May, we also helped arrange for the funding of a memorial garden in Deer Park for Salem area victims of COVID-19. And once again, we had to cancel our Pinot for the park's wine tasting event. And because the event is our main fundraiser for our legacy fund, we produced and mailed an extra newsletter appeal instead. Our legacy fund is managed by Oregon Community Foundation, now stands at $83,500. We're currently exploring the possibility of taking on the funding of a new, not yet determined special project for this coming year, in addition to the projects we will fund through our neighborhood park grants. Our last special project was the playground equipment for the playground at McKay Park, completed in October of 2019. And that's my report. I would be happy to try to answer any questions if that's wanted.
Thank you so much, Carol. I really appreciate that. Very concise, but great information. I had one clarification just to start. You mentioned you doubled the amount to $28,000, if I understood right, that you gave out this year, but then you also had to cancel your fundraiser. So did you just give out more, or was there more that actually came in that allowed you to give out double this year?
We just gave out more. The fundraiser goes to our legacy fund, and we did cancel it, but we expect to get some from our newsletter appeal. So we just had a hard time saying no to the requests that came in, so we just went ahead and did that.
That's really wonderful, especially in this last year. I think as we all here recognize the importance of parks and open spaces. So really appreciate you doing that and investing in the community. Open it up to everyone else. Any questions for Carol? Carol, I might ask is there a written or a PDF version of this that you could share with Tony? I don't believe we got one ahead of time. And if
I didn't get it done in time, so I can send the document to Tony.
That would be wonderful, just so we have that.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not hearing any other questions. So thank you so much, Carol, for being here and for all the work that Salem Parks Foundation does. We always appreciate sharing Alan with all of the great work here in the parks. Okay, well, have a great evening and thank you for being here. We can now move on to our status of unsheltered individuals in the parks. And Gretchen Bennett, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. It took a second to get me unmuted there. Thank you so much for having me. And I do want to take a second and really appreciate that, because I understand the challenges that come with this issue and camping and garbage and impact on the environment. And you've been gracious to be able to continue the dialogue with me and with this topic. So thank you for the time. I thought I might begin by helping to clarify, just in case there's questions. I know the numbers related to COVID-19 and the pandemic have been rising. And when the pandemic first started in March of 2020, the city had moved to have camping in the undeveloped areas of Cascades and Wallace as a result of the pandemic. And so I thought it would be important to begin by clarifying there are no plans, no discussion to do that again, despite the pandemic growing and the numbers climbing and all of that. There's no thought of reopening the idea or reconsidering the idea. I thought that might be helpful to clarify. Instead, related to the pandemic, we're working hard with our people who do street outreach and who have a medical background, our county partners, the Northwest Human Services and others, to provide information about vaccine opportunities, about physical distancing, about masks, and all the other appropriate safety measures that can be taken for people who are unsheltered. But we're not moving to request space in the parks again, as had been done previously. So wanted to clarify that. We're also just really cheerleading the work of the Public Works Department and the Parks team and the Operations Division, who've been working so hard to restore the spaces. As you know, we have completely closed Cascades Gateway Park and are also continuing to be at work at Wallace Marine Park to remove garbage and mitigate the impacts that had come from the significant use of the spaces for sheltering. We're certainly struggling. There's spaces, for example, along the edge of Cascade Gateway Park as its adjacency to the ODOT property that is the southbound on-ramp to I-5, and we've experienced a number of cuts to the fence as people opt to shelter on state property, and then they're right there by Cascades Gateway, and we're trying to work through that challenge as we're experiencing it right now. But we're trying to immediately go out and respond when we identify that people are camping at Cascades and have them not be there anymore. To help prevent impact on the parks, we're just working hard at identifying and opening alternative sites. I'm at work on helping Salem prepare a navigation center to be open, which will be an indoor shelter. It's a building that's not on a park property. And we're working on getting a second micro shelter site open, again, on a parking lot on private property, not in a park. So we're basically at work trying to find alternative shelter solutions to help meet the needs of people without impacting parks is our intention. So I guess with that, that's essentially my update and what I thought you might be interested in, but I'm absolutely happy to receive any questions that you may have.
Thank you as always, Gretchen. Really appreciate that. Just to clarify that last point you made about the navigation center and the other shelter, is there a rough timeline for that? I know it's always a moving target, but is there any expected date?
Thank you. It is such a moving target. I can't even get over the moving target experience I'm having. If I guessed spring or early summer for the navigation center, I think that's what I'm getting the sense of right now. We're hoping to utilize the navigation center building through the winter as a temperature activated warming site in and around the construction work that we're doing so that we can capitalize on the asset. But there's a number of things that we need to do to the building to prepare it to be a navigation center for 24/7 shelter operations that we're going to be doing through the winter months to get that ready. So I'm hoping for spring, but we're a little too early in the process to identify that. And we're actually still looking for funding partners because the costs to the building prep have exceeded what we had anticipated. So we're at work on funding. The other site is located up at 3749 Portland Road. It's adjacent to 3737 Portland Road, which is a piece of property owned by our nonprofit partner, Catholic Community Services. We have already opened safe parking there, so people in their vehicles are staying on that site. We have 8 vehicles currently residing there where people are living in the vehicle. And then we're acquiring 30 of the little micro shelters that will be on the parking lot. And those are overdue at this moment. We're working on getting them. We have 1, and then the rest are in production and are quickly coming together. And any day we should be having those and be able to place people into the micro shelters. We're also working on the warehouse building that's at that property, hoping to be able to bring some people in the winter months to the indoor part of that property as well. So all of that is underway. We've had some supply and contractor delays in getting the micro shelter part open. We also, beginning October 1, are going to be able to activate the indoor building at 2640 Portland Road, which will welcome 20 additional people inside for sheltering through March 31st. Another project that's underway is the Project Turnkey Hotel. The city made a contribution towards acquisition, and that one's currently under some renovations. And the Community Action Agency expects to open the first floor of that hotel. They're aiming for November to be able to open that, and that will be individual hotel rooms for sheltering people as well. So I think those are the near-term horizon projects.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Paul. I
Of
see your hand.
course.
Yeah, I really have to applaud your efforts because just in driving around Salem, and I'm a frequent visitor to Wallace Park, the visible presence of unsheltered individuals is certainly far reduced from what it was just a few months ago. And the park cleanup at Wallace certainly was impressive for what was there before. But obviously, you must really have. Is it the fact that you've been able to find shelters and provide these shelters for the people, the reason perhaps for that, or have some people moved on because of the summer months, or but anyway, something is working, which I applaud you for doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I think it's a little bit of all of the above. On the positive side, for example, there were 2 families with really young children at Cascades Gateway Park that were able to accept and step into a housing strategy for them. So we were really grateful to see that placement happen. But not very many people come into those settings when we have a larger closure, I've noticed. Other people have just moved on to other places. They've found other solutions. Some have taken advantage of the open shelter beds. We were so grateful for the Union Gospel Mission opening the expanded men's shelter, and some have taken advantage of those opportunities. We have others that have relocated to other parts of town. We're concerned right now about camping along the sidewalk in front of the Big Lot store on Lancaster Drive, and we're working at seeing what we can do to address that concern. There's a pretty large camp that's grown quite a bit on a piece of private property at Portland and Kale that we're working with the property owner to address. That's gotten quite large and concerning for those neighbors. And there's other kind of pockets that the on-ramp southbound at this east edge of Cascades is growing, I understand, pretty regularly. And we have some returning to Market and I-5 that we're working to try to prevent because we don't want that camp to begin again. That's a really unsafe area. So we have, a little bit of everything going on, I think.
Alan.
Gretchen, thank you so much. And it is promising. The town looks cleaner, and it certainly makes everybody feel better. I got a question about the considerable amount of cleanup and restoration being done in particularly our 2 parks. Do you know the funding source for all that work?
No, I don't think I do. I think it's either our general fund or it's the America Protection Recovery Act dollars, but you don't need me to speculate on that. I can certainly find out and get that information to you. Our budget office will be able to confirm that. I know we've made an allocation for this cleanup work, but I can't recall the funding source.
Well, thank you so much. I know it's probably larger than at first anticipated, and I'm just curious about where the funding source is.
Yeah.
Keith?
Yeah, thanks, Gretchen. And I'll echo the kind of positive sounding momentum here in terms of park protection. I know there's a long way to go for the city yet, but in terms of parks, I think that's all positive news, and it's been good to see. I guess I had a similar question to Alan in terms of the park cleanup and funding, but we'll await further word on that. The other question I had in terms of the other shelters being designated, I was just curious in terms of those projects, the micro shelters, the parking, the navigation center. What is the capacity for those? Because I think last time you were here, if I'm not confusing my numbers, we talked about like 1,500 unsheltered individuals or so living in the parks, and I just wondered what's the city's increased capacity or planned capacity along those lines in terms of being able to offer that sheltering opportunity, or are we going to see a significant number displaced into other regions as we're seeing right now?
Yeah, thank you, Keith. That's a great question. First, I want to go back and clarify the 1,500 number. As I've always understood it, is an estimated number of people who are unhoused throughout the region. And so some certainly many hundreds in parks, but that would also include sidewalks and people who couch surf and all of the other types of people experiencing different types of houselessness. Let's see, there is a dashboard that we put together that I could get to you that tries to lay out some of the numbers. We're not at 1,500 by any means. For example, the hotel project is going to achieve 120 hotel rooms, which is exciting. So if you figure 2 to 4 people per hotel room, you do the math, that gets you a few hundred. Union Gospel Mission's expansion adds approximately 100 men's beds to what they had previously. The CCS site that we're starting up, the 3749, when it's fully activated, will be well over 100 people staying there. The current 2640 Portland Road site is adding 20 people to that one. We also achieved a hotel program that's currently running that has 15 hotel rooms for 10 weeks. And so that's, roughly another 90-ish people that are being assisted that way. So you start doing the math, and at one point there was a number of about 500 newer beds emerging, but it gives or take, and I don't have the paper right in front of me, but we do have a dashboard document that I can find and forward to you as well. But we aren't there yet in completely closing the gap. And we also have some acknowledgement that we have some folks for whom we haven't been able to design the right type of shelter or service that would cause them to go indoors. There are some for whom they're not coming indoors, and we haven't figured out the magic bullet to encourage them to do that. And that's sometimes behavioral health, and sometimes substance use issues, and sometimes other trauma in a person's background that's present that makes it difficult. And we certainly can't compel people to come indoors. So we have a number of those issues at play too.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that sounds good. That seems like a pretty significant increase in capacity, which is good, because I think, without that, it's the problem for the parks and other city properties and private properties isn't going to go away. So good to see that relatively significant uptick there on the shelter.
Any further questions for Gretchen? Okay, well, Gretchen, thank you again for coming. It's really helpful for us just to know where things are at. And I appreciate you starting with the clarification of where some of these properties will be and just everything that you've laid out for us. So it sounds like potentially if you could share that dashboard document and then the funding sources per Alan's question, that would be really wonderful. And Tony can forward that to all of us.
Very good. It's been my pleasure. And thanks again.
Have a great evening.
You too. Bye.
All right, well, our next item, moving right along, is the recommendations from our Park Usage and Permitting Subcommittee. First, I just want to really commend Keith and Woody and Alan, and then especially the help of Robert and Kimberly in making this all possible. So over the last few months, just some of you may be aware of all this and saw it in the minutes, but the kind of top line is we spent most of June doing our own research and figuring out what other cities have done, reading through city code here in Salem, and putting together a long list of recommendations. And then Robert and Kimberly put that together. Meanwhile, we had a meeting with the Human Rights Commission as well as the LGBTQIA+ intersectional task force. And so both of those groups we met with to hear their concerns and to think about our issues in context of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and some of the projects that are underway, such as the Safe Spaces project the intersectional task force is working on. We then held 2 public meetings. And the first meeting, we worked off of the memo that Robert and Kimberly initially created, kind of compiling all of our recommendations. And then the second meeting, we refined that, finalized it, and that is what you have before you today. I'll note that there was 3 public comments submitted in our process. And those were in the minutes that were sent out to you. Those definitely, I would say that they are all positive in terms of the work. So it's helpful to know that there was no no criticisms or concerns that were at least vocalized during the process. So it's really good in that sense. And I think all of us are really happy with the recommendations we put forward here. My suggestion would be I'll just quickly, just very briefly talk through each one, just a top line item to make sure it makes sense, and then open it up to all of you for recommendations or suggestions. And the goal tonight is, if we all feel comfortable with this, we as SPRAB will approve this memo, forward it on to council, and then it will be presented to council at a time to be determined, likely at the end of the month or start of October. Any overall questions before I just quickly share some of the top line items for folks that weren't following the process? Yeah, Mickey.
I had a quick, thank you. In the methodology, I was just curious, and from your description, did you have a total of 4 public meetings or was it just 2?
Great question. So we had 2 that were just us as a subcommittee, but we attended 2 of the meetings that were, so one is hosted by the Human Rights Commission. We attended their regular meeting, and the other was the Intersectional Task Force, their regular meeting. So technically there was 4 public meetings, but the other 2, we were more guests on the agenda, similar to Gretchen was just here. And the other 2 were where we were hosting the public comment and everything.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I don't know if everyone has the document in front of you, but I'll be very brief and we can elaborate on any that you might have questions about, but just thought it would be helpful to give a sentence or so about each one. So the recommendation number 1, statement of expectations on permits. This is really just laying out the expectations, simply put, that we don't have that clear expectation laid out, and we've seen that in other areas. So trying to state those very clearly. Number 2 was reporting acts of discrimination. It was revealed that we really don't have a way to track this. So it's hard to even make a ton of recommendations without having the data to start with. So trying to get the data there. And this is something that can intersect nicely with the Safe Spaces project that the Human Rights Commission is working on. And so it's something where we can start to collect this information. Accessibility at events. This is really focused on ADA and thinking about how this can be incorporated into our reservation system and our permitting. It's currently not called out, so trying to find ways of working that in. And some of you may remember there were some concerns about signage and making sure that it was required to at least list where could be just accessible areas and preference for those at different things like the amphitheater. This is something some of us heard about at SPRAB, I think about a year ago. So trying to build that into the permitting process from the get-go. Number 4 is summary of rules and consequences. This is, as it sounds, really trying to lay that out, similar to number 1, making it very clear what those are. Number 5 is the expectation of enforcing violations of park rules. While this really is more of a matter of policy and resources for city staff, we just want to emphasize that with all of these, they need to be enforced to be effective. So the addition of more parks rangers and compliance officers is one recommendation we suggested the city look into. Number 6, tiered fines for repeat violations. So as it sounds, trying to make sure that the cost is not so low as to encourage bad behavior, but to make sure that there is a penalty. Number 7, notification of event impacting other park users, really trying to make sure that park users, especially at places like Riverfront, et cetera, have a heads up if there's going to be big events coming, especially if they're going to use walkways, bridges, et cetera. So really trying to have that ample notice for people that might go out there regularly. The same with number 8, posting approved permits. This is for reservable facilities specifically. So if someone were, say, using the amphitheater area just outside, then they may not know that it's going to be reserved in a few hours, but at least there's a way for them to be aware of that. And it helps lend credibility when someone comes in, their reservation time is up. Number 9, excluding individuals, really providing that authority that if someone is not paying for the damage, there is a penalty. Number 10, this is limiting multiple reservations. This is very much reflected in the public comment we did receive and some issues we've all heard about in terms of certain areas like Riverfront and concerns about potentially having one group taking popular spaces or multi-use spaces. So trying to figure out a better way to process that. And so really trying to think about those rules for Riverfront specifically, but for all parks. Number 11, the sound permit. There was some confusion, I think, for all of us as we look through in terms of maximum allowed decibels. And so trying to clarify this and also enforcement. So clarifying this both in city code as well as in the permit itself. So trying to make that very clear for anyone that's getting that permit. Number 12, the notification requirements. If you look into the code right now, there's actually a whole class where the people receiving the permit are the ones that are responsible for notifying apartments, condominiums, et cetera. And so trying to find a way to streamline that where the city could do that process so the onus is not on everyone seeking a permit. Number 13, prohibiting bad behavior. This is pulling a section from Eugene to really state this very clearly about bad behavior is being prohibited. And number 14, finally, is trying to pull lessons learned from the pandemic. And as we stated here, focusing on future health emergencies, trying to figure out those lessons learned from the past year and a half. What are things that the city could do better and really create kind of a mini playbook that they could draw upon going forward. So that is just a very brief overview. Happy to talk through more of them, but first I want to open it up to the rest of the subcommittee. So Woody, Keith, and Alan, if you have additional thoughts or comments you want to add about the process or the resulting memo.
Actually, at this time, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Keith.
Just, well, maybe two thoughts. One, for those who did a detailed reading of the subcommittee minutes, just a note that the numbers that are referenced in that minutes don't line up with the numbers in this final report. Those changed and since the last time the subcommittee discussed it. So there's not a direct alignment there. And then the next thought I had, Dylan, is maybe at some point talking about kind of what the next expected steps are for this and for the subcommittee in terms of city implementation.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to share that. So the next expected steps would be if we all feel comfortable with this, we will approve on it or approve it tonight. It will go to council, and the expectation, and I will let Robert Chandler share any other additional thoughts on this, but the expectation would be council would direct city staff to start implementing these. For many of these, this would require a rulemaking process to go into effect. Some of these could also be part of the code updates that are underway already with the city. And so there will be a few different processes that will take place, but the hope will be city staff can take this and get to work. And then eventually a lot of these recommendations, rulemaking processes, et cetera, would come back through SPRAB and then go to council again for final adoption. But Robert, how'd I do?
I am not, oh, there you go. Took me a minute to get unmuted there, host. Perfect. I have nothing to add. I'm Robert Chandler, Public Works Assistant Director, and Dylan got it perfectly right.
Thank you, Robert. Alan, you're back now on video. Okay. Did you have anything to add?
Yes, I reading the minutes, it looks like I had plenty of opportunity, and I did, and I certainly appreciate other members of the subcommittee being both patient and tolerant with me. I think we vetted this myriad collection of topics very thoroughly and tried to give balance to best protect our parks and our citizens. And so I think I'm interested to see what council does with it, but I think there was a lot of thought and a lot of soul searching that went on in preparation of this report.
Thank you, Alan. I'll open it up to the rest of the board. I know for many of you, this is the first time you're seeing it. Mickey, I know you were able to attend a couple of the meetings, so I really appreciate you participating there, but what does everyone think? Are there any questions, further clarifications, or potential suggestions? Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, I was just impressed the amount of information that everyone had to go through to take this broad overview, not so much overview, but review of lots and lots of regulations and the effort that everyone put into this to bring it together. I think it's really important because none of you are code writers, so to speak. You know, you're not technicians. So you're looking at it from, I call it a public a kind of user viewpoint. And I was very impressed with the thoroughness and the fact that what I would call common sense recommendations that came out. So on a personal note, I'm glad I didn't raise my hand to be on the committee and the amount of work that went into it. So I applaud all of you for what you put into it.
Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate that. And I know that it was a lot of work, but I think you're absolutely right. There is something really special about us all being able to come at it from someone who maybe we haven't used the permitting system. We aren't code writers, like you said, so we can lend a fresh eye. And I think that it brought together a good set of recommendations. Mickey, Tony, Rick, any further questions that you might have? Okay.
I had a couple of comments. I was, and I still am, I'm very impressed. That was a lot of material to go through. And after reviewing all the comments from the materials you all had reviewed, I think you did an amazing job. I enjoyed the discussions with, talking about the enforceability and whether things could be enforced. No, I just thought it was really, really good. I listened to the city council meeting back on May 10th again when this all started. And one of the questions that came up during that meeting was public events versus private events. And and I just was wondering if that ever came up in the discussion amongst the subcommittee.
That's a really good question. I don't think we discussed it directly between the two. We very much looked at it as the permitted events, which would be private. And I think you're right, though, that in terms of city events, I think some of these like posting notifications would still apply. But I don't think we made a clear distinction between that. Alan, Woody, and Keith, would you have anything to add? So it's a good point, Mickey. Is there anything you would recommend that we adjust or add, or do you think that it's sufficient the way that it is?
Oh, I think it's fine. I just didn't know if that question had, it had come up at all with the discussion. The last thing that I wanted to bring up was, I know it's been taking a while to go through legal and get a number of code changes with our tree code and other codes done. I know there are a lot of concerns in Salem about getting this implemented as soon as possible. And I realize it has to go through a long process with us approving it and then it going to council, et cetera. Have you heard, has there been any discussion about a goal timeline or something? Like, will it be before next season, possibly?
That is an excellent question. And Robert, do you mind if I turn that over to you for some insight?
I don't think we talked about timelines. The goal would be to have everything done in place for the next event season, because we're still pretty busy even now in September with this event season. But there is a lot of work, and we'll prioritize among the various opportunities and tasks to just plow our way through it. A lot of it depends, as you know, on staff availability and our spare time to focus on different things. But I think the majority of these things should be done in time for the next permit season, event season. A lot of it is permits, sound code, things like that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I realize that we come up with the recommendations and the council develops policy, and then the city gets to do the administration and implementation part. During the two PUP meetings, there was a back and forth discussion about notification and posting and some of the challenges with doing that. And I just wanted to say, I hope we look at maybe posting a calendar so that individuals who want to know if there are events scheduled or reservations at a particular park before they go, that they will have a place on the city website that they can do so, to just check. I'm just trying to think of ways that would save time in terms of posting and the notification and how it impacts other park users.
Sure, that makes sense. And we'll look at that. Among the things I learned in the course of getting feedback from our professional staff is we had at one point in the past posted, various reservable facilities, what was reserved, and found out that our postings were heavily vandalized and the postings themselves did not last long in the field. So we'll look at what options are survivable, I guess, or sustainable might be a better word for it. And see what we can do. Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, that's it.
That's a great recommendation though, Mickey, about ways of using the city website as well. So, and I think that there's a lot of, while all of this boiled down to 14 recommendations, there was a lot of others in the long document that you may have seen. And some of those are small things like wording changes or two definitions that didn't line up. And it was basically our understanding is that city staff will be looking through all of those, especially for some of those changes too. And so I think things like this are things that will hopefully go into that docket. And while these will be the top line kind of big processes that are undertaken, a lot of that can be incorporated into the execution.
Sounds wonderful.
Bill, if I could, just to Mickey address your previous question about public versus private, I don't recall that particularly coming up. I missed the first subcommittee meeting discussion, so maybe it did there. But I just kind of looking through the recommendations here, I think pretty much all of them would apply to either. Where we do specifically say it is on the accessibility, right? And so we specifically mention that it's public events there are accessible for the Americans with Disabilities Act, which would be the one that wouldn't necessarily apply to a private event, I don't think. But so we do kind of address it there, and at least in some way. But yeah, I think most of them would apply kind of regardless.
Woody, yeah.
Well, the only question I agree that it would just pretty much the same with both of them. Maybe priority might be affected, have something to do with it. But other than that, I don't see how they're any different because they should be treated the same.
But Mickey, I really appreciate you raising it, and I think it's good for us to go back. I will note, just for the record, Keith brought up at our last meeting that one other topic that was raised was alcohol in the parks and the percentage. And by looking at other city codes and then learning about how recently some of those have been updated, we decided that wasn't something that necessarily needed to be incorporated onto the list of recommendations. So that was another topic that was flagged as one of the long list at the start that we did discuss in that case. But so at this point, as I mentioned, we would need a motion to move this on. I think something along the lines of SPRAB formally recommends that council adopt the following policy recommendations and direct city staff to begin the process of implementing them. But I do want to ask, we have Mark Weinstein on the line. And Mark, you have been really helpful throughout this whole process for us as a subcommittee. And I don't know if there's anything in the motion setup that you would find that you think we should include, given that this is a process of us recommending to council to direct staff. So if there's any language that you would like us to include, please let us know.
I'm not sure if in the motion you need to include language to direct staff. I think the motion, and I would defer to Robert on this because he's probably listened to Councilor Nordike's motion more recently. But basically, my recollection is Councilor Nordike asked for some specific information from this, and I think basically that the motion should be that something along the lines that these recommendations or this document be prepared be the official response of the Salem Park and Recreation Advisory Board in response to Councilor Nordike's motion of May, I'm not sure the exact date, asking for recommendations from the Salem Park and Recreation Board regarding the following issues. Basically, that this is SPRAB's formal response to Councilor Nordike's request for this, and not include in the motion, unless the board so wishes, that they instruct the council to adopt it and make further use of it in a particular way. I think that Councilor Nordyke was looking for this information to then use to inform the council for future direction to the staff. That makes sense.
That's really helpful context. Thank you, Mark. Robert.
It might be simple, and I know Mark is still listening, is the motion would be that for the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board to submit the recommendation from the Park Usage and Permitting Subcommittee for council's further consideration. Something along those lines.
And I think that works as well.
Just fewer words, Mark.
Yes, it's much fewer words, and it is clear because I believe within the document itself that it mentions that this is SPRAB's response to Councilor Nordyke's request. So just something very simple that the Salem Park and Recreation Board adopt the recommendations of the subcommittee to be its recommendations of the whole and forward them on to council.
Just trying to capture that in writing to make sure I have it down here.
And I do think it is important that it be sort of both those, that the board is adopting the subcommittee's recommendation as the recommendations of the whole board and to forward them on to council.
I'm just going to throw what I wrote in the chat here to make sure that folks feel comfortable with that. Want to make sure we always get our wording right. Keith, you're always the eagle-eyed wording man in this group. Did you have any additions?
You beat me on submitting to the chat by about half a second. So, but that is more or less what I had, I think.
Wonderful. Would somebody like to make the motion?
I would be happy to do it. And I agree completely. As a matter of protocol, you guys have already incorporated it. Whenever an advisory group makes a recommendation, it's for consideration by the governing body. And that's exactly what we've done here. But I would, just as presented, I would like to make that recommendation.
Thank you, Alan. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rick. Do we have any further discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll do a quick roll call. Mickey Varney.
Aye.
Alan Alexander.
Aye.
Tony Cato.
Aye.
Woody Dukes.
Aye.
Dave Freidemacher is absent. Rick Hartwig.
Aye.
Keith Norris.
Aye.
Paul Rice.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The motion passes and our memo will be forwarded on to council. Thank you all so much for your work on this, both the subcommittee and the full board consideration reading through this. I think this is really exciting. This is a real opportunity, and I think these recommendations have the potential to make a big difference in the parks, and a lot of them are small, simple changes, but I think they send a good message and will hopefully be really impactful next season. So thank you, Robert, too. I appreciate you. I know you've put a lot of time into this, so thank you.
And Kimberly.
And Kimberly, yes, absolutely.
Yes, personally and professionally, thank you all very much. It was a pleasure working with all y'all, and it's good work. Definitely a good body of work. Thanks.
Okay, well, let's keep moving on. We have a section now for board member updates, now that there's been a few things, including the climate action plan, the library task force, and we're starting up the master plan season as well. So this can be a good opportunity for us to share any of those. I will quickly note, as it's listed over in the left-hand corner, that the climate action plan will be in a city council work session on September 20th. And so encourage everyone to continue to follow along with that. There's been a lot of really great work on the city of refining that, doing additional outreach over the summer, and it's really exciting to see where that's going. Keith, do you want to share anything from the library subcommittee or strategic? You can tell the name of it as you give the update.
The Public Library Strategic Plan Steering Committee.
There we go.
Yeah, so short version is I don't really have much to update. So I think my last update to you was we finished a equity lens workshop earlier in the summer. At the conclusion of that, the consulting group was putting together a survey that was in multiple languages that would be sent out and made available, and as well as working to initiate some focus groups. My understanding is those have not moved forward, or have maybe moved forward, but very recently here. They were wanting to wait until after the main library opened, which was scheduled to begin on September 1, but I believe was further postponed. And so the idea being that the survey would be made available at the library, and at the main library would be better circulated among library patrons to be a useful survey. So it's basically the steering planning efforts for the large part, at least from where we're concerned on my role on the steering committee, are in a bit of a delay and holding pattern at the moment.
Perfect.
That's, I think, all I have.
Are there any other board updates? Okay, so we can move on into our information reports. We are ahead of schedule right now, so this is congratulations, everyone. I mean, I feel like we're getting a lot of really good information here too. So we have the Mission Street Park Conservancy minutes. I thought I saw Christine join the meeting, but I do not see her in the list anymore, unless I'm missing her name. But were there any questions regarding the Mission Street Parks Conservancy minutes? Okay, hearing none, we can go on to the urban forestry update. I see Mylan just came on video. Hey, Mylan, good to see you. Is there anything you'd like to add verbally, Mylan, on top of the report? I missed that if you shook your head no, but there we go.
Well, no, I was muted, so. No, thanks, Dylan. I can't think of anything unless you want me to bore you guys for 20 minutes or so. I would say that I've been working on a sort of a presentation for Oregon Community Forests, the Department of Forestry for Oregon, that I could share with you guys in one of the future meetings here coming soon that I'm about to do. That it's just about the ice storm. It'd be a quick 20-minute thing if you guys are interested in hearing that. That wouldn't be today. I'm just talking about it in the future.
I think so. I know we've all been really impressed with the maps, and it's incredible to think that the ice storm damage is still ongoing, and the cleanup and the seeing the scale of it on these maps has been really impressive. And also just understanding the challenge that you're under. So really appreciate those updates, and the visuals are very helpful. So I think that would be useful.
Thanks, Dylan.
Keith, yeah.
Yeah, Mylan, just one of the questions I had, you mentioned kind of looking at replanting where space allows. Does the city favor native tree planting in any sort of way as part of that lineup of considerations that you had there?
You know, we would love to give preference to natives that we think would do well in a streetscape setting. So, you know, we will push for a few natives in those scenarios.
Okay.
Tony, I see you came on. Did you have something to add?
No, I'm just on board for some park planning updates.
Gotcha. Paul,
Yep.
yeah.
I do know that just with native trees, oftentimes they're a little slower growing before they get established, and then they take off. But that's so I suppose one consideration is how fast you want a space to be filled with a tree. So, but
yeah, I don't know that it's the speed at which we want things to grow, but more, you know, soil requirements for native trees are going to be a lot different.
native trees didn't
A lot
evolve
of-
with concrete around them?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the trees that are living in Oregon just have so many more requirements and things that they typically would prefer than living inside of a tree box next to a road, next to a sidewalk with really poor quality soil. So, you know, a lot of the trees that we do choose are trees that are tolerant of very harsh conditions. And that's why you see the trees that you see in city after city after city. So I would love to have all natives on the streets. That'd be amazing. And we definitely are going to push more natives in the parks. And we planted quite a few more natives in the streets this year, especially the Oregon white oak. But as we see things and try new things, I think we will be pushing for trees that do well in the hot, arid sort of drought, heat, all the things that we're getting in the summers now that aren't a lot of the trees that we have. So in the streets. So yeah, we will hopefully be changing a little bit of our planting palette over the next few years.
It's really helpful, Mylan. Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, guys.
Tony, you're standing in for Patricia tonight?
I am. I have a couple of things to add in addition to the information report that you have. And you already mentioned the climate action plan. Just be sure to highlight that is on Monday, the council work session, or excuse me, not this coming Monday, but on the 20th. And councilors will have opportunity to discuss some of the challenges involved in making those decisions about how to reduce greenhouse gases. So that should be an interesting discussion if you want to visit that meeting. Also, Rob wanted me to mention that the Gear Park master plan is going into its 30% design review for the skate park. Excuse me. And with that, sometime around the end of the month, they're going to begin some public outreach and start with a survey to get some feedback on just generally what folks would like to see as far as components of the skate park. Sorry, excuse me. And then I also want to mention for Jennifer Mangalo, our natural resources planner, she wanted me to be sure to say that the tree planting that is being done, the focus on McKay, is that in? I don't know if that's even in there. It's not. The focus of the tree planting will be at the McKay and Brown Road Park sites, and that there's also a pilot project going forward. And maybe you might already know this, but pilot project going forward to promote tree planting on private property. And there's a mailer that's going to go out, and that is focused right now on the NOLA, or the North Lancaster Association neighborhood. And I think those are the updates. Oh, and then the beaver strategy that should be going forward in October and come to SFRAB at that time.
Tony, could you elaborate more on that pilot project? I know that when we had the active tree subcommittee, we talked a lot about ways of trying to encourage planting on private property. And I'm curious, is it? It says, I think it said here, Friends of Trees was involved in that, but.
Friends of Trees, to the best of my knowledge, Friends of Trees provided some information to get started on a survey to residents. And what I understand is that we're kind of doing an initial survey on what the interest is, whether, yes, I do want to plant, or no, I have no interest in planting. So try to just ascertain that as far as what the residents' thoughts are on private planting, and then go from there. That's about all I know on that project, unfortunately.
I can tell you a little more, Dylan, if you want to know just a little bit more information.
That would be helpful. And just to kind of feed one other question into that, if it's all right, is that I know earlier this summer, you all were looking into a public survey more broadly about trees. And this is something as the tree subcommittee, we had worked on this, I think, a year and a half ago or so. And then I think Deborah Top had put it into the city budget. And I think the goal was to send something out by the end of the summer, but I didn't hear anything more on that. So I don't know if that has gone out or if that's now part of this.
Yeah, no, I can tell you that we're working with Friends of Trees to do street tree planting, some park planting, and along with that, we're going to tie in those plantings with areas where we're going to do flyers for people if they want to plant yard trees as well. So I know we're doing the Highland Park area, San Francisco Drive, Northeast. And we're meeting with Friends of Trees over the next few weeks to sort of find a few other areas around town where we're going to do street tree planting, but then also tie in some private property trees and park trees as well, all together.
Thank you, Mylan. That's helpful. Tony, you're on mute. Are you?
I'm happy to gather up any additional information and send it to the board to update you on that.
That'd be great, especially the survey. My recollection would be that there was going to be an update when, especially curious how it related to the survey we had talked about. We were still meeting once upon a time, meeting in person as a tree subcommittee. So that would be great if you could update us afterward.
Happy to do that.
Saw your hand go up.
I had a quick question. Will the mailer/survey go out to the individual residences, or will they be going to the owners of the property, or both?
It's my understanding they're just going to be like a door hanger.
Okay.
And it would be left at the residence. So I'm not sure, if it's a renter, if they're not passing that information along to the homeowner or the property owner. I'm not sure how that works.
Okay, thank you.
I'll ask that question as well, Mickey.
Thank you.
Good question. Keith, yeah.
Yeah, I just on the Gear Park, Tony, or maybe one of the other board members, I know we were asked to reconsider that at our last meeting, the recommendation for the master plan. Did City Council discuss that any further prior to adopting the revised master plan? Does anybody know?
I believe that they approved the master plan with 40 parking spaces, additional parking spaces. And Robert can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's what they approved.
Okay.
Yep. Oh, I see Robert's back.
Yeah, sorry, were you waiting for me to acknowledge? Tell me again, Tony, what?
I believe council approved the Gear Park master plan with 40 additional parking spaces.
Yes, that is correct. The number of parking spaces shall be 40.
And that was the reduced amount. That was the revised master plan, correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
I think it went from 90 something to 70 something to 40. Does that sound right, Tony?
Yes.
Yeah, it went down quite a bit, Keith.
Right, that's what I saw that number and thought that was, just was curious how they received our previous motion that said, no, we should stick with the original plan. and if you don't, then here are a couple of other things we suggest. I wasn't sure if that got discussed in any sort of robust way.
It did, and it's worth noting that Mickey went on behalf of SPRAB and gave a really great presentation to council that they found. I felt like it was very well received. They asked a lot of questions, and Mickey just did a really fantastic job summarizing our conversation for them and bringing in things like the climate impacts, but also thinking about accessibility, the nearest bus stop, all of those things. So I feel like Mickey did a really wonderful job, even though the outcome was still 40, it was higher than some of the other numbers that were on the table. So there's a good impact in that sense. But Mickey, did you want to add anything else, having been at the meeting too?
No, I thought the discussion was really good and really thoughtful, and they took what we said under consideration and came up with a compromise that seemed to work very well.
Okay, anything else on Parks and Natural Resources before we move on to Parks Operations? All right, thank you, Tony. Appreciate that update.
You're welcome.
All right, Parks Operations update. Jennifer, there you are. Fascinating to see all these photos. So thank you for including that. Really helpful context, and just some of these numbers in terms of the amount of garbage is hard to comprehend sometimes. So.
Well, and sometimes the visual, part of the reason I try to include photos when we have them is the visual, the contrast between the before and after is quite stark. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to see the improvement.
Absolutely. Your team's doing great work. I know that as we talked with Gretchen earlier today, a lot of that is being carried out by you and your staff. So thank you all for that work. Is there anything you'd like to add as an update to the written report?
I don't really have anything extra to add tonight in particular, no.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Yeah, Keith.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. I saw in the report additional lighting being added, and was just curious. It reminded me of a public comment we got a few months ago, and I don't remember exactly which meeting, about lighting concerns at Pioneer Cemetery, I believe it was. And so I was curious if those concerns had been addressed in any sort of way. I know there was some discussion over the city and their ability versus the utility and their responsibility for the lights. But then also, wondering for these new light placements, what sort of awareness had been made to the neighbors of those parks where the new lights are going to be, and what sort of guidelines were being put in place to make sure those lights weren't going to be an issue.
So the Pioneer Cemetery actually has been concluded. That actually took place within a couple of months of when that public testimony transpired. And so we worked certainly with that particular individual. The PGE representative several times came down on site to do the assessments for angling of the lights and for dark areas, to make sure that for neighborhoods in and of themselves, that any light replacements that would not be glaring into the neighborhoods. And so there was some tilts and some shields and all of those kinds of things to help rectify those issues. And we have not heard anything negative from those neighbors or that neighborhood since that process concluded. So our assumption is that everything is fine with regard to that conversion, based on a lack of response that it wasn't. But that is something we take in with all of the lighting things when we work with PGE, is we don't want to have certainly unintended consequences to neighbors where they now have light shining in their backyards, and we try to diffuse those or put angles on. And PGE is great about making those recommendations with us, but certainly they also are very receptive and go out that after the lights are put in place, if we should be experiencing any concerns from neighbors or from anyone that maybe something needs to be angled a little more, or a shield put up or something along those lines, they're happy to come back out and help us work through that process and make any adjustments that need to happen. So it really has been a good partnership with them. They've been very proactive in trying to remedy those situations if and when they occur.
Okay, great. And I think it mentioned that these were being put in for safety concerns. Is that a safety concern that Parks has brought up, or is that something that the neighborhood themselves have brought up and asked for the lights? I guess what's the motivating factor?
So it's both. Northgate, for example, looking at that, there was a couple of spots along the trail path with concerns from the association that, especially as we're getting into darkness in the morning and darkness at night at earlier times, that maybe the illumination wasn't as strong in some of those along that path. And so we reached out and are doing an assessment with PGE on that to see if there's opportunity to add a couple of lights there along the path system. Inglewood, we replaced those lights out actually and did those a couple of years ago when initially there was a gang shooting there in 2019. That park has such a thick tree canopy that was part of the issue. So we worked closely with PGE on how we could replace those lights and add lights that would allow for some illumination in the park itself with all the tree canopy, and in some of the dark areas of the park without it being detrimentally impacting the neighbors. But there's recent, one of the things that came up with Inglewood just recently, I guess I can update really quickly. They had reached out to me. So all of that has gone fine. However, they've had a continued increase with drug activity in parts of the park and then along 19th Street in the front side of the park along the street. They wanted to add an additional street light, which is not a parks issue. It's a street light issue, but we've been working with Kevin Hopman with regard to that. But they also wanted to see about the opportunity with the escalation in conjunction with kind of the lights is to put some cameras up in the park. So we've had some experience in past years where sometimes that's been successful and sometimes that hasn't. So I facilitated a meeting with SPD and the neighborhood association counselors, Stapleton and Anderson, to talk about the feasibility of those cameras in conjunction with making any lighting modifications to the park to kind of help in those issues. So I'm happy to say that meeting was about a month ago, a little less than that. And I'm happy to say that we continue to work with SPD. We're going to be ordering 2 cameras. These are at the recommendation, the types that SPD recommended that would be beneficial for them from an enforcement standpoint. And so they're helping us facilitate those specific kinds of cameras and there will be one that's placed in the interior of the park, the central interior of the park, where the tree canopy won't be an impediment to where the camera is. And one that will be placed closer to 19th Street, kind of in the area where some of that drug activity has been prevalent. So once those cameras arrive, then we'll get those installed. SPD will monitor that footage. So that will, they'll be responsible for doing that. So that was part of why it was so important to have them in that conversation. It doesn't do any good to put cameras up if nobody is going to monitor it or it's not useful information. So they'll be monitoring that activity. So it's been a very good cooperative effort. We are going to do a little bit of light tweaking as well. We've made a request with PGE closer to the 19th Street. There's a little bit of an area that the neighborhood association feels is still maybe a little bit dark, where they like to, the folks doing the drug activity likes to hang out. So we put a request in with PGE to kind of look at that area specifically a little bit to see if there was a way to maybe angle the lights that are currently there to help illuminate that area without it detrimentally impacting the neighbors right around there. And then, like I said, we're working with Kevin Hopman about the potential of putting up a street light along there as well. So, and then the Bushes Pasture Park one, that was actually initiated by PGE. For us, they need some additional lights along Mission Street for security reasons. They feel that that's a little dark along there. So they actually requested that. It's technically on park property. And so that's why they're working, although it's going to be very close to the street itself, but it's technically on park property. And so we don't have any concerns about that to help illuminate all those parking lots along Mission there. So that was initiated through PGE. And then Hoover Park was actually raised by SPD by one of their officers who had been in the park and saw that there was some lighting issues. Come to find out when we did some research and worked with PGE that the lighting issues are actually predicated on the recent school construction activity, the bond activity at the school. They cut into the underground lines and damaged the lines. And so that's why the lights are not working effectively. And so PGE is working with the school district to find out the contractor and stuff to see how they can remedy the situation. They're going to have to basically find where the damage is in the lines and then try to repair it. So that actually wasn't a lighting issue per se, it was a construction repair issue. So, but it was brought up by SPD.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Jennifer? Okay, thank you so much, Jennifer. Really appreciate the great update.
Thank you.
And Tony, let me know that Jennifer Mongolo, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly, has joined us. And hello, Jennifer. And so I don't know if you caught that conversation on trees that we were having about the yard tree pilot program, and didn't know if you had any additional information that you wanted to share.
Yeah, I did. I was actually watching on YouTube. Since I wasn't giving the beaver strategy presentation today, I thought I'd still see what was going on with Sprab. And I did catch the tree conversation, and I just thought I would hop on and answer some of the questions you guys had about the tree survey and the pilot yard tree project. So those are two separate efforts. We are trying to coordinate timing though of the mailers so that they're not too close together. So Deborah is working on the survey part of it, and the questions for the survey are being put together. That mailer is going to go out throughout the city to low canopy areas, I believe. I don't know a lot of details on who that's getting sent to or specific survey questions. I've only been kind of tangentially involved in that. But then we are also working with Friends of Trees on a yard tree pilot project, which is going to be in the North Lancaster neighborhood area. And that is going to focus, we're going to do a mailer to all property owners and in that area, in that neighborhood area, but we will be kind of canvassing, as Mylan said, more specifically in the neighborhood between Brown Road Park and McKay School Park. And the idea is to really focus our planting efforts in one area this year. So we'll be doing some planting around the ball fields at McKay School Park on the outskirts, kind of shade trees for spectators, and then planting trees at Brown Road Park, and then some street trees in between, and then hopefully get some residents in the area interested in planting trees in their front yards. So that the survey, I do know that we're trying to coordinate with the mailer for the survey so that they're not coming out too close together and confusing people. So the mailer for the survey will come out in early, let's see, I think that's going to be going out, I don't know, in the coming month or two. That's going out pretty soon. And then for the yard tree pilot program, Friends of Trees will be sending that out, I believe, in December. So hopefully there'll be a little bit of a gap between those, and the survey will kind of prime people who get both for, something else coming. So that's kind of, I think that might answer some of the questions I heard. I don't know if you had any others that I missed.
That is really helpful. I'm really grateful for you jumping over from the YouTube channel and joining us. So thank you.
No problem.
While we have Jennifer, did anyone else have questions that did not get answered? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you so much. And we look forward to the Beaver strategy update in the future.
All right, thank you.
And right on cue, there's Becky George. Wonderful. Thank you, Becky. Wonderful to see all the photos of the Ironman. What a great event that was across the city. Are there any quick updates you want to share with us in addition to the report?
I don't think I have anything other than what I put in the report, but if there's questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Fellow board members, any questions?
Becky, you mentioned, I think 2,000 people at Ironman. Was that meeting expectations?
Yeah, so good question. Yeah, so this was the first time they've ever done it. So I think they tried to cap the registrations at, I think they said 2,500, and they ended up lowering that a little bit. I don't know if that was due to COVID or what, but so they capped it at 2,200. And sometimes they have people that don't show, so that's why I put the 2,000 in there. But yeah, that's participants, obviously. I mean, with all of those participants come, potentially family members, friends, things like that.
Right. No, that seems like a pretty good size event. Do you know because this is they'll be here for 2 more years, correct? And are they planning kind of the same event, same size for the next couple of years, barring any sort of COVID impacts? But
yes. So I believe they signed a 3-year agreement with Travel Salem. So you're right, they would have at least 2 more years with the potential for it to continue even past that. So my guess is that they would probably increase numbers especially if we're, God forbid, we're out of at least a little of this COVID restrictions. So I could see where they would have, maybe upwards of 25 to 30,000 people in future events if the park and their route and everything can accommodate it.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Becky. And really great to see all the different programs that have taken place this summer. I know it's that we thought we were out of the woods, or at least getting there, and then it didn't quite happen. So really great to see everything that you're able to do.
Yes,
Paul.
thank you.
This is just a comment on the Ironman. A friend happened to participate in that. Each individual runner, biker, had a tracking device, and you could actually go onto the computer and pick out that one individual, and it would show you where they were in the whole race and how fast they were going too. So, but the particular individual I knew, they were moving right along until toward the end, and all of a sudden they slowed way down.
I can't, I'm sorry to say, I can't blame them by any means, but yeah, so they have a chip. A lot of the bigger events do that. And it is really nice, especially when you have in this particular case, a 70.3 mile course that they're going over. And for a lot of family members, it really helps them to be able to track their loved ones. And then obviously it also helps their organizers for the event know and be able to track exactly where people were and that type of thing. So yeah, it's the technology these days is pretty amazing.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much, Becky.
Thank you.
I see we have the park damage report on the agenda. I didn't see one in the packet. Tony, was there a damage report or any damage that we should know about?
It is forthcoming.
Okay,
I can get it out to you probably in the next couple of days.
thank you. Any new business that other board members would like to raise? Okay, well, our next meeting will be October 14th. I hope you all have a wonderful month, and really great to see you all, and look forward to seeing you again in a month from now. Tony, do you have one more thing?
I do. I'm
Yes.
going to be sending out, in preparation of our annual report planning, I'll be sending out the last year's annual report for you to review and kind of get the wheels turning a little bit as we'll start discussions on that in October. And I also left off a project that is coming up here in the next week, and that, just to let you know, is a virtual meeting with the neighbors surrounding Bill Regal Park, because we will be completing that park next spring. So I'm going to be meeting with them virtually, and then also soliciting information through the website on a survey on what type of play equipment they'd like to see. And then we're in the middle of the design and construction drawings for that activity. So we'll have a completely finished, completed park next year. So just wanted to let you know that. I left that off the list.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from board members or members of the staff before we close up? Okay, well, have a great evening, everyone. Thank you for your work today, and the meeting is adjourned.